I was mid-roll in a training exercise, teaching a couple of rookie SWAT officers how to breach a building without getting their heads blown off, when my phone buzzed on my hip. A motion alert. That wasn't unusual. My home's loaded with cameras, inside and out, a side effect of years in law enforcement and the simple desire to catch porch pirates in 4K. But when I tapped open the live feed, I nearly dropped the rubber training knife I was holding. A flashlight beam was sweeping across my living room wall. Someone was inside my house. At first, I thought it might be a burglar, until the camera adjusted and showed a middle-aged man in cargo pants and a vest marked Community Patrol, creeping past my bookshelf like he was raiding Bin Laden's compound. 2 others followed him. One in a fishing hat, another with a walkie-talkie clipped to her fanny pack. My stomach twisted into a knot, not out of fear, but out of sheer disbelief. It was Karen's fake security patrol, and they had just broken into the wrong damn house. Now, let me rewind a little. About 2 weeks before that home invasion disaster disguised as a neighborhood safety sweep. My name's Luke, and I've been training SWAT teams, federal agents, and elite security forces for the better part of 15 years. After working full-time in the field, I switched gears to instruction and consultation. Semi-retired, I bought a quiet house in a suburb to get some peace, raise my dogs, and not worry about flashbangs rolling under my bed at 2 a.m. The neighborhood? It's your classic picket fence, HOA-run kind of place, complete with newsletters about hedge height regulations and paint shade approvals. Most folks were friendly enough, until Karen took over. Karen, no last name needed, was your standard-issue HOA dictator wrapped in a pastel cardigan and a permanent scowl. She had a laminated badge labeled HOA chairwoman, a whistle she blew during garbage day disputes, and the kind of delusions of grandeur usually reserved for warlords. Her latest obsession? Forming a civilian community safety task force. She claimed crime was on the rise. What crime? Someone once left their trash bins out an extra day. Once. But in Karen's mind, the cul-de-sac had turned into Gotham City. So she went full throttle, recruiting volunteers from the neighborhood like she was assembling the Avengers of passive aggression. I'll give her credit. She committed to the role. She printed uniforms, khaki shirts with Velcro name patches and the words, Neighborhood Safety Enforcer, stenciled on the back. She passed out clipboards and instructed people to record suspicious activity, which included everything from blinking porch lights to houses with tinted windows. You can probably guess which house was at the top of her list. I kept to myself. I trained officers in my backyard sometimes. Nothing extreme, just non-lethal exercises, tactical theory, physical fitness. All legal. All above board. But to Karen, my blackout blinds, motion sensors, and locked storage unit were obvious signs of a criminal operation. When I explained I worked with law enforcement, she scoffed and said, "So you're like a security guard then?" I said nothing. No point correcting someone who thought her HOA bylaws overruled the Constitution. Then came the first warning. A pink slip taped to my door. Notification of voluntary safety inspection request. Voluntary. In quotes. It also stated that if I refused, the Community Safety Task Force reserved the right to escalate for the safety of residents. I crumpled it and threw it out. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The night before the break-in, I caught Karen and 2 of her goons measuring the length of my driveway with a tape measure. I stepped out to ask what the hell they were doing, and Karen smiled like a villain in a Disney movie. "Just checking setbacks," she said. "Some of us are trying to keep the neighborhood safe. You never know what's going on behind closed blinds." I told her to leave my property. She pretended she didn't hear me. And that brings us back to the day everything exploded. The moment I saw them in my living room, I went cold. I wasn't panicking, I was calculating. How long would it take me to reach the house? Could I intercept before they left? Were they armed with anything stupid, like pepper spray or an old taser? One of them, Karen's son Kyle, fancied himself military adjacent after playing too much Call of Duty. He was the type to do something reckless. I dismissed the recruits and told them training was cut short for a real-world case study. Then I jumped in my truck, hit the silent alarm app, and drove like a bat out of hell. On the way, I called the police and told them trespassers were in my home. I didn't tell them yet who I was or what I did. I wanted clean optics, and I wanted Karen to step in it so hard she'd be pulling HOA contracts out of her teeth for a year. I reached my house in 6 minutes flat. I parked down the street, approached silently through the back fence, and entered through the garage. By the time I got inside, Karen and her little task force were arguing in my kitchen about whether they had the authority to open the locked door to the shed. One of them was holding a set of bolt cutters. That's when I made my move. I flicked the breaker and killed the lights. They screamed. From the darkness, I called out, not shouting, just calmly, like I was giving instructions during a drill. You are trespassing in a private residence. Put down your tools, exit the premises, and lie on the ground. This is your only warning. Karen shrieked something about being authorized personnel, and Kyle lunged toward the hallway. That's when I flipped the hallway strobe, part of a training rig, and Kyle immediately ran into the wall at full speed and crumpled like a folding chair. The others scrambled for the door, but I was already there, flashlight blinding their faces, instructing them one by one to get down. Karen stood her ground for about 5 seconds. I know my rights, she barked, pointing a finger at me. Yes, I said, and you violated most of them tonight. She finally dropped the bolt cutters. 10 minutes later, the real cops arrived. I handed them my ID, explained the situation, and showed them the footage. The officers, who recognized me immediately, barely held back laughter. Karen tried to explain she was investigating a potential domestic operation and was acting under the authority of the HOA security clause. The officer looked at her, then back at me and said, "You train my entire department. Did you give her permission to enter your house?" I shook my head. Karen was stunned silent. And just like that, her ridiculous empire of plastic badges and clipboards started to crumble. But trust me, that was just the beginning. By the time the red and blue lights painted my driveway in strobes, Karen was already pacing like a wet cat, still clutching her clipboard like it was going to magically justify what she and her team had done. Her son Kyle was groaning on the floor where he'd crashed into the hallway wall, one shoe missing, belt twisted sideways, and looking like someone who'd just lost a street fight with a revolving door. The other two, Janet and Ron, Karen's ever-loyal accomplices, sat on the couch, staring into space like they were trying to disassociate from reality. You could almost see the exact moment they realized, oh no, this wasn't just an awkward HOA moment. This was a felony. The first officer to step out of the cruiser was Lieutenant Marquez, a man I'd trained 3 years back in advanced tactical response. He gave me a subtle nod as he approached, but otherwise kept his expression professionally blank. I appreciated that. Karen, not sensing the shift in energy, stormed up to him with all the righteous indignation of a woman whose coupon expired yesterday. "Officer," she barked, "I'm so glad you're here. We've apprehended a highly suspicious individual. He was hiding behind blackout curtains and training people in his backyard. He has an entire shed full of who knows what. And when we came to investigate for the safety of the neighborhood, he ambushed us. You have to arrest him immediately." Marquez blinked once, slowly, then turned to me. I said nothing, just held up my phone and pressed play on the footage. Karen's voice echoed from the speaker, clear as day. "Cut the lock. I don't care if it's illegal, he's probably building bombs in there." The silence that followed was glorious. The kind of silence you only get when someone realizes they've been caught with their hand, not just in the cookie jar, but with crumbs all over their shirt and the jar labeled evidence. Marquez folded his arms and said, "So, let me get this straight. You and your volunteers forced entry into a private residence without a warrant, consent, or emergency justification." Karen looked like a car trying to start in the cold. Stuttering, spluttering, fingers pointing in 3 directions at once. "It was an HOA-sanctioned wellness check," she said finally. "Karen," I said, my tone calm but razor-edged, "you picked the lock on my side gate, disabled one of my cameras with a broom handle, and entered my house with tools and weapons. That's not a wellness check. That's burglary." Kyle muttered something from the floor. "I think it was. We didn't mean to." Janet started crying quietly. Ron pretended to be asleep. Karen's knuckles whitened around her clipboard, as if sheer grip strength would reverse the consequences. Marquez sighed and reached for his radio. "Dispatch, we're going to need backup at this address. 3 trespassers, potentially armed. 1 injured. House clear, homeowner on site." Karen exploded. "This is a misunderstanding. This is harassment. You're taking his side because he trained you." Marquez turned to her, all professionalism gone from his voice now. "No, I'm taking his side because I watched a 10-minute video of you breaking into someone's house with a bolt cutter and a flashlight. If this were anyone else's home, you'd already be in handcuffs." She shut up. At long last. When the second patrol car arrived, it became real for everyone. The cops were polite, professional, but firm. Kyle got checked out by paramedics and put in the back of a cruiser with a bag of ice on his forehead. Janet and Ron were separated for statements. Karen stood stiff as a board, refusing to answer questions unless they were legally mandatory, which she said with the confidence of someone who had watched exactly half of a courtroom drama once and thought she was a lawyer now. While the officers processed everything, I stood by the front door, watching the neighborhood come alive. Curtains moved. Doors opened. People started gathering like it was a block party. Mrs. Chambers from across the street leaned over her porch rail with a martini glass in hand, mouthing, "What the hell happened?" I shrugged. She grinned. One of the officers returned to me with a clipboard full of incident reports. "We'll be filing charges for unlawful entry and possession of prohibited self-defense weapons," he said. "You want to press charges yourself, or let the city handle it?" I thought about it for a second. It would have been easy to say yes. But I knew Karen would dig her own grave faster if left to her own devices. "Let's start with the city," I said. "I'll add my piece if she tries anything again." The officer nodded. "Good call. I'm guessing this won't be the last time she pulls something. I'd bet my shed on it." Karen was finally escorted out, not in cuffs, yet, but with a stern warning not to set foot on my property again. Her face was twisted in a mixture of rage and humiliation, the kind that makes you wonder how someone convinces themselves they're the hero of a story when they've just been caught breaking into a house like a cartoon villain with a fake badge and zero self-awareness. As the last cruiser pulled away, a few neighbors cautiously approached me. "What happened?" someone asked. "Karen's security team broke into my house." "Wait, like broke in? Yeah. Caught them in the act. Whole thing's on tape." A few jaws dropped. Someone laughed. Mrs. Chambers just muttered, "About damn time." I went back inside, closed the door, and exhaled. The house was a little out of order. Nothing major, but enough to leave a bad taste in my mouth. They'd opened drawers, checked behind furniture, even opened the dog food container. Why? What did they think they were going to find? A meth lab behind the spice rack? I spent the rest of the night cleaning up and reviewing footage, labeling files for police and legal follow-up. There was no doubt now, Karen wasn't just annoying. She was dangerous, delusional, and worst of all, she had just enough influence to get others to follow her into madness. I stared at the paused video of her entering my home, eyes wide and flashlight drawn like she was clearing a terrorist hideout. The irony, of course, was that she had no idea who she was dealing with. I'd trained real tactical teams. I'd advised law enforcement agencies on how to conduct lawful searches. Karen was pretending to play G.I. Jane in a neighborhood where the worst crime was someone's dog pooping on the wrong lawn. But now it was personal. She didn't just break a law. She broke my trust in the neighborhood. And that's when I decided, this wasn't going to be just another police report. Karen needed to be held accountable in a way that would leave no room for comeback. I was done sitting back. It was time to show her what a real response looked like. Not with violence, not with chaos, but with strategy, precision, and the same tactical discipline I'd spent my entire career teaching others. Karen thought she was the sheriff of this town. She was about to find out what happens when the real trainers step in. The fallout from Karen's little commando raid hit faster than even I expected. Less than 24 hours after her community patrol got caught playing House Invader at my place, the story exploded across our neighborhood group chat. Someone, probably one of the teens who filmed the police cruisers outside my home, posted a blurry video of Karen being walked out by officers, and it took exactly 4 minutes for it to go viral within our HOA. The caption read, "Karen's cops arrested for breaking into SWAT guy's house. You can't make this up." And suddenly, the woman who had spent years terrorizing residents over mailbox paint colors and unapproved rose bushes found herself squarely in the community's collective crosshairs. The group chat lit up like a bonfire. People who had never spoken a word suddenly had stories. Mr. Lin from 2 blocks over said Karen once accused his 12-year-old daughter of domestic espionage for using binoculars in the backyard during a science project. A single mom on Cedar Lane revealed that Karen's patrol once followed her teenage son home because he wore a hoodie. And apparently, someone named Teresa had an entire file of Karen's handwritten warnings threatening fines over suspicious composting. These weren't just HOA infractions, they were obsession-level stalker note. As these stories poured in, something else happened. People stopped being afraid of Karen. For years, she'd ruled through intimidation and technicalities, always hiding behind the bylaws and the facade of neighborhood improvement. But once the illusion of authority shattered, everyone began to realize what she really was: just another entitled person with too much time, too little power, and a delusional sense of importance. The next day, I was sipping coffee on my front porch when a black SUV rolled up to the curb. It was sleek, tinted, government-plated. I already knew who it was before the passenger door opened. My buddy Evan stepped out, suit pressed, badge clipped to his belt. We'd worked together back in the day. He went full federal while I shifted into training and tactical consulting. He grinned like he'd just heard the juiciest story of the month. "You always did know how to throw a party," he said. I nodded toward the house. "You want to see the footage?" I made popcorn. He didn't need to. He'd already seen it. Evan and I went over everything: what they touched, what they took pictures of, even the audio files I'd captured from the inside cams. He wasn't just interested in the break-in. He wanted to know how Karen had organized this entire operation. And when I showed him the HOA emails she'd sent, the ones outlining her emergency safety procedures and the list of homes deemed high risk, which included mine, a retired firefighter, and a nurse with 2 toddlers, Evan's face went from amused to stone cold. "This isn't just overreach," he said. "This could count as coordinated harassment and unlawful surveillance, especially if she used HOA dues to fund it." That's when I pulled out the folder that would become the bombshell: the Community Safety Task Force Intel Log. See, when Karen's team scrambled out of my house, they left behind a cheap binder filled with printed notes and photos. And it wasn't just of my place, it was a dossier of neighbors. Names, habits, routines. Notes like "leaves house at 6:45 a.m. daily, why so early?" and "kid wears dark clothing, possible gang association?" They even had time-stamped photos taken from bushes, porches, and cars. It was surveillance. Illegal surveillance. Evan flipped through it slowly, letting the weight of what he was seeing settle in. "You know," he said, "if this was a private investigation without licenses, that's a legal violation. And if she involved any public officials in this, she's toast." I finished for him. That afternoon, I sent an anonymous tip and a copy of the footage to a local news blog that loves covering neighborhood drama. They ran the story under the headline, "HOA Hero or Power-Hungry Trespasser?" Suburban Karen leads illegal raid on SWAT trainer's home. Within hours, the story caught fire on Reddit, especially on r/entitled people. Thousands of upvotes. Comments ranged from, "This feels like a sitcom episode," to "Why hasn't this woman been arrested yet?" Someone even made a meme of Karen in aviators labeled "Commandant of the cul-de-sac." Back home, the HOA board held an emergency meeting via Zoom to deal with the backlash. They tried to keep it private, but of course someone leaked the link. I tuned in just in time to hear Karen's panicked attempt to save herself. She claimed everything was a misunderstanding, that she never entered my home, and that the entire thing was deeply edited to frame her. But the board didn't buy it. Not when the footage clearly showed her yelling, "Cut it open!" like she was leading a military raid on a cardboard drug den. It got worse for her. A few members of the board resigned, furious that she had dragged them into what could now become a class-action lawsuit. One woman, a quiet librarian named Darlene, took off her reading glasses mid-meeting and said, "I supported you when you wanted to ban wind chimes. But this? This is insane." Karen tried to speak again, but her internet conveniently froze. Or maybe she unplugged the router out of sheer embarrassment. The next morning, a formal investigation was launched into the HOA's use of funds and authority. Karen's house was visited by two plainclothes investigators. She tried to act normal, waving at them from the porch like she wasn't being scrutinized for multiple counts of trespassing, harassment, and potentially misappropriating HOA dues for the printing of tactical patches and fake credentials. Even better? One of the investigators was a former student of mine. I didn't have to lift a finger. While all this was happening, people started coming to me in person. Neighbors who'd never so much as waved before suddenly wanted to talk. They brought cookies, asked about security upgrades, and thanked me for finally putting Karen in her place. One elderly man, Mr. Watson, even said, "I can finally go out and garden without worrying about whether my gnome violates some ordinance." I kept it low-key. I wasn't interested in becoming some neighborhood hero. But I did want accountability. And when one of the former board members handed me a USB drive containing every HOA meeting transcript for the past 2 years, including several off-the-record notes about monitoring behavior of non-compliant residents, I knew Karen's reign was officially circling the drain. Still, I wasn't done. I had one last card to play. With Evan's help, I drafted a formal complaint to the city council and the district attorney. Not just about the break-in, but about Karen's entire operation. The fake patrol, the unauthorized surveillance, the misuse of community power. It was time to take her off the board, out of the HOA, and maybe even into a courtroom. Karen had crossed the line. And now? She was about to learn what happened when the guy she tried to frame for suspicious activity had trained half the officers in the county and kept every receipt. You could feel it in the air. The mood in the neighborhood had shifted like a pressure drop before a storm. The silence that usually coated the mornings was broken by murmurs on every porch, whispered speculation in driveways, and lawn chairs pulled closer to sidewalks as neighbors openly discussed what everyone used to only grumble about in private. Karen was no longer just an annoyance. She was a scandal. The once untouchable queen of the HOA had become a punchline, and it was spreading faster than dandelions in spring. I kept a low profile, but I watched. I listened. People were organizing. It started with a quiet, unsigned flyer on every doorstep. Emergency HOA vote, this Sunday. For our safety, our rights, and our sanity. No one claimed credit, but I knew who was behind it. Her name was Judith Langley, retired Navy JAG officer, grandmother of 5, and the only person in the neighborhood who once stared Karen down over a driveway dispute and made her back off without raising her voice. If there was anyone I trusted to restore order with precision and zero tolerance for nonsense, it was Judith. The emergency meeting was held at the community clubhouse, which hadn't been that packed since the infamous Halloween potluck where someone spiked the cider and half the neighborhood tried to karaoke Bohemian Rhapsody. Now it was standing room only, the tension thick as everyone waited for Karen to arrive and try, once again, to assert control. She made an entrance, of course, rolling in with two teenage boys wearing matching polos labeled HOA Patrol Recon Unit and mirrored sunglasses that didn't match the fluorescent lights. The boys looked like they were being paid in leftover Halloween candy and vague promises of community service credit. Karen strutted in behind them, chin high, clipboard in hand, and dressed like she was about to deliver a State of the Union address rather than answer for breaking and entering. People didn't clap. They didn't boo either. It was worse than that. They just stared. Karen took the mic and tried to jump into damage control. She called the incident at my house a training miscommunication, claimed I had invited them, yes, invited them, for a joint security exercise, and that the footage had been doctored by malicious digital actors. She actually said those words, digital actors, like I had hired CGI specialists to fake her saying, "Cut the lock," while holding bolt cutters. That was my cue. I didn't say a word. I just stepped forward with a flash drive and handed it to Judith, who was presiding over the meeting like a judge in a military tribunal. She plugged it into the projector. The footage played for everyone to see. Karen's voice echoed through the room, loud and clear, as she directed her squad to breach my door and search my living room for evidence of suspicious activity. Kyle's crash into the wall got a chuckle. The part where Karen ordered Ron to check the cabinet, see if there's anything that looks like bomb supplies, Drew gasped. Karen's face was frozen in a smile that looked more like a grimace stapled in place. Her teenage patrol started slowly backing toward the exit. Judith paused the footage. Then she turned to Karen and asked the only question that mattered. "Do you deny that this is you?" Karen stammered. Blamed lighting. Said the angle was wrong. Claimed her voice had been manipulated. The more she talked, the quieter the room got, and the redder her face became. Then, someone from the back spoke up. It was Mr. Adler, a former police officer who'd mostly stayed quiet about Karen's antics. Until now. "I ran the audio through my department's forensic software," he said, holding up a small folder. "It's authentic. Not edited. Not manipulated. This is real. This is criminal trespassing, unlawful surveillance, and attempted coercion under the guise of HOA authority. There was no recovering from that. A motion was made to remove Karen as HOA chair. Seconded. Voted. Passed. It wasn't even close. Then came a second motion, to disband the so-called Community Safety Task Force permanently and ban any similar organization from forming without a 2/3 vote and formal city authorization. That passed too. Karen stood motionless, clutching her clipboard like it might float her out of the room. But this wasn't her ship anymore. She was sinking fast. I thought that would be it. I really did. But Karen wasn't done embarrassing herself. She called a press conference on her own front lawn the next day, taped printer paper to a music stand, pulled out a megaphone, and addressed 3 confused-looking neighbors, 1 dog, and a mailman who immediately turned around and walked away. She declared herself a victim of tactical bullying, and said that her attempt to bring order and protection to the neighborhood had been sabotaged by shadow forces. I watched from my porch, coffee in hand, thoroughly entertained. Later that week, I received a formal letter from the city. Thanks to the footage, the testimonies, and the mountain of complaints piling up, they were initiating a legal review of Karen's conduct under local statutes governing HOA conduct, impersonation of authority, and misuse of community funds. She was facing fines, a potential court date, and, if found guilty, a complete ban from holding any HOA office in the state. And yet, the best moment came later that weekend. I was hosting a private training session in my backyard. Low-key, just a few former trainees brushing up on breaching techniques and tactical assessments. The gate opened, and in walked someone unexpected. One of the teenagers from Karen's patrol, the lanky one with the walkie-talkie and oversized sunglasses. He looked nervous. I didn't know," he said quietly. "About you. About any of it. I just thought it'd be cool. Doing security stuff. But that was messed up. I didn't mean to break in. I nodded slowly. Let him sweat a little. Then I asked, you want to learn how to actually do this kind of work? The right way? His eyes lit up. Really? Sure, I said. But first, you're going to do some reading. And then you're going to help fix my fence. Karen's crew bent one of the hinges. He nodded fast, practically saluting. It was poetic. The same kid who'd tried to sneak through my house like a dollar store spy now hauling tools to repair the damage. By the time the sun went down, I had neighbors waving as they walked by, a burger on the grill, and a tentative peace restored. Karen's windows stayed shut, her blinds drawn. Her car hadn't moved in days. Whether she was still plotting or quietly packing, I didn't know. And honestly, I didn't care. She'd marched into my home thinking she was untouchable. But she didn't know I trained the very people who deal with threats far worse than clipboard dictators. And she learned the hard way that when you try to break down the wrong door, sometimes the door hits back. Karen's house went dark the following week. The curtains that once fluttered in a perfectly timed routine, as if she were signaling some kind of suburban Morse code, stayed drawn 24 hours a day. Her plastic lawn decorations, those little patriotic gnomes holding mini clipboards, were gone. The HOA issued street newsletter, which she usually hand-delivered with smug little notes like, "You're welcome for the oversight," showed up late and with no signature. People started saying she might be leaving town. Others said she was just laying low. But everyone agreed on one thing. Karen had finally been knocked off her throne, and the neighborhood had never felt lighter. The city's legal wheels didn't move quickly, but they moved, and thanks to the overwhelming evidence and the formal complaints from more than a dozen residents, the district attorney's office announced that a public hearing was scheduled. Not a criminal trial, yet, but a full civic investigation into misuse of authority, impersonation of public officials, and unlawful entry into private property. The notice went out, and the entire community buzzed like a beehive. Everyone wanted to attend. Everyone wanted to see Karen explain to a real judge why she thought her made-up safety force had the right to bust into someone's home like they were shooting a low-budget spy thriller. The hearing was held at the downtown Civic Center. It was open to the public, and they had to move it to a larger room after more than 60 people RSVP'd from our neighborhood alone. The vibe was somewhere between courtroom drama and family reunion, with people wearing polos, sun hats, and even a few t-shirts that read HOA, Hands Off America. That last one made me laugh. Karen showed up last, dressed in a power suit about 3 sizes too bold for the situation, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he was regretting life choices. He wore an expression like he'd expected a boring civil dispute and walked into a political minefield. When it was my turn to testify, I didn't dramatize. I didn't need to. I laid out the facts. How I received a motion alert, arrived to find my house illegally entered, provided video and audio recordings, and identified the suspects. I didn't embellish Karen's behavior. Her own words and footage did the work. I finished my statement with something that seemed to hit the room harder than anything else. I've trained law enforcement officers across 5 states on how to enter a building safely, lawfully, and respectfully. Karen did none of those things. She's not a safety officer. She's a threat pretending to be one. The room was quiet. Karen's attorney tried to paint the whole thing as a misunderstanding, an overzealous attempt at community safety. He even floated the idea that Karen might have felt endangered by strange activities on my property. The moment he mentioned that, Judith stood up from the audience and called out, "You mean the CPR training for first responders?" A few people snorted. The judge banged the gavel, but the point was made. The final ruling didn't surprise anyone. Karen was found in violation of multiple civic codes, including impersonation of an authority figure, unlawful entry, and harassment through unauthorized surveillance. She was fined heavily, not just for the incident at my house, but for her entire fake security operation. She was barred from holding any HOA office or position of authority for 10 years, required to take a community ethics course, and ordered to make a public apology at the next HOA meeting. It wasn't jail time, but it was the kind of sentence that cut her right where it hurt, her ego and her control. Back in the neighborhood, that ruling felt like a celebration. People held a barbecue on the greenbelt. Someone even brought a piñata shaped like a clipboard. There was laughter, music, and a distinct sense that we'd all survived something together. Mr. Watson brought a cooler full of sodas and passed out tiny neighborhood peacekeeper stickers to the kids, joking that they had more authority than Karen ever did. As for me, I kept it simple. I added an extra lock to the shed, updated the motion sensors, and sent a thank you message to every officer who helped shut this mess down. I declined the HOA's offer to chair the security committee. I didn't need a title to keep things safe. And honestly, I preferred being the quiet guy people nodded to when they passed by, someone who handled business without making a circus out of it. A week later, something unexpected happened. I got a visit. It was Karen. She stood at my front door, alone, no clipboard, no sunglasses, no teenage patrol in tow. Just her, holding an envelope in one hand and looking like she'd swallowed something bitter. I opened the door and waited. She didn't ask to come in. Didn't pretend to be friendly. She just held out the envelope. "I was told to deliver this," she said. "The apology." I took the envelope and nodded. She stood there for a moment longer, like she wanted to say something else. Maybe defend herself. Maybe explain. But then she just turned and walked back to her car. No eye contact. No farewell. Just silence. Inside the envelope was a typed letter, clearly drafted by her lawyer. It was clinical and vague, referencing unfortunate choices, misguided initiatives, and unintended consequences. But in the margins, scrawled in her handwriting, were 3 words. I was wrong. That, more than anything, closed the chapter for me. The final twist came later that month when the HOA approved a new initiative, an actual licensed security consultant to review neighborhood safety policies. I didn't apply for the job, but the board asked me to consult. Not full-time. Just advice. Help them set up legitimate practices, sensible security, and community-friendly procedures. I agreed, with one condition. No more plastic badges, no more fake patrols, and absolutely no more Karens. Now, on most evenings, I sit on my porch with a glass of iced tea, watching kids ride bikes and dogs chase squirrels. The neighborhood feels calm, grounded, like it finally remembered what it was supposed to be. A community, not a dictatorship with shrub height limit. People stop to say hello now, ask for advice, thank me for what I did. I don't correct them when they call me the guy who stopped Karen. But in my mind, I just did what anyone with training and a spine would have done. I defended my home, protected my rights, and showed a bully the exit door. No battering ram needed. And sometimes, when the sun sets just right, I catch a glimpse of the new HOA chair, Judith, standing tall with her notebook, listening, not lecturing. No megaphones. No drama. Just leadership. So yeah, the HOA security patrol busted into my house thinking they were heroes on a mission. They didn't know I trained the real heroes. And now they never will forget it.